Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez, and as always, we're going to start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son, Jesus Christ, may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build together with all people of goodwill a civilization of truth and love to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. I am honored to introduce you to Andrew Haack. He is a contributor to the Human Defense Initiative, and he describes himself as a blessed husband, a proud father of 3 fun, exhausting kids, a work-in-progress Christian, aren't we all, and, Lord permitting, writer on culture, politics, and theology. So welcome, Andrew, and he is a contributor to Human Defense Initiative, and he has a blog, which is called Since Nobody Asked, Theology for Life. I love that title, by the way. Very clever. Clever, yes. I don't have many people asking me about theology either, but they hear plenty about it. You know, they know better than to ask them, especially my family. Oh, don't get her started. Here she goes, you know. So welcome, Andrew, and I saw this very, very apt tweet by him today as I was asking the Holy Spirit for a guest on human population control because of Bernie Sanders' comment yesterday about population control during the CNN town hall. I think it was yesterday. I heard about it yesterday. Anyway, he tweeted out, 3000 BC, we must sacrifice a baby for favorable weather. 2019, we must sacrifice millions of babies for favorable climate. Very, very succinct. I love people who could put things parallel, do comparisons, because it brings out the horrible, horrible truth that people who feel that climate change is an urgent necessity are in favor of sacrificing millions of babies. They see no problem with it. So congratulations on that great tweet, Andrew, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
So you said about 6 years ago you started blogging at Since Nobody Asked?
Mm-hmm.
And what made you start?
I've had people telling me for the longest time that I should start a blog, should start writing, I put it off forever just because bloggers always seem to have a negative aspect. Always very, very critical. But eventually kind of gave in and then started doing that. It was actually right around the time my son was born. Had a couple of weeks off for paternity leave, and thought, you know what, I've got a little bit of time that I haven't had before. Maybe now is when I should start that, and so that's what I did.
Having free time when the baby is born, very funny. By the way, along
a lot less now.
Along the header of your blog, do I see C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien among Star Wars figures, and a picture of the crucifixion? Am I right? No, mm-hmm. Star Wars, right. Star Trek, the cross, our Lord's crucifixion. Is that Tolkien?
It is. Yep.
Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. So I guess you like fantasy and science fiction.
I do.
Uh-huh. And you can see some connection there, or some important messages. Very good. So you've been blogging, and what's been the effect on your life? Blogging changed my life, by the way, in 2006. I was very frustrated, and I needed an outlet. So again, people said you should blog, and I'm like, who wants to listen to me? But there are people out there.
Yeah, I one time heard somebody say, I write to make the voices in my head be quiet, and so far I'm unsuccessful. So it's a little bit like that.
It's to give voice to them. Come on, they've got something to say.
Yeah. I mean, you get a lot going on in your mind, and then it helps so much to get things out. I know a lot of people will do, say that with journaling and what have you. But it feels really helpful to write, and it also kind of forces me to do something, constructive other than, living life and raising, a family and, church and everything like that. But it kind of forces me to engage with, theology and culture and things that, I may be thinking about, but not really engaging in.
Yeah, it gives you something to do. I joined the blogging world because I'd always been a pro-life activist, but I got frustrated in what I was able to do. I live in the Northeast, you live in the Northwest, so sometimes you feel like you're shouting into the wind. And you're not. You're probably doing more good than you think. I mean, they say in Unplanned that every time people are praying outside, they have like up to a 90% no-show rate, but you don't see them not showing up when you're praying outside an abortion clinic. But when you blog, sometimes you get a comment or on Facebook, and sometimes you create a firestorm. As I just stepped on one with talking about Harry Potter. We won't go into that right now. But someone's listening.
We should, though. That would be fun. Another time.
I don't know. Anyway, but that's like one of the third rails of Christian writers is Harry Potter. It's a way to get into a nice big fight with people that you were very friendly with before. So I'm not going to take the bait right now. But anyway, you're able to also meet people like somebody from the West Coast instantly and talk about things that we have in common, like the idea of sacrificing children for favorable weather. And I'm a firm disbeliever in global warming, and I will explain the reasons why. And none of them are scientific. I listened to a very good program last night on Mark Levin's show, where he had, very good scientists that were debunking global warming. So I'll leave that to them. I do not have a degree in science, degree in psychology and education. So that's where I will approach it from. But what I do want to share is talking about how the Democrat candidates for president are talking about, and this isn't a political show, but how it's emerged that they're interested in climate change and overpopulation at the same time, which I find very interesting. It seems that this is sort of the hidden agenda all along. This is my impression, and it's just sort of raised its ugly head. Climate change is a vehicle to control population, which is part of a larger agenda to introduce a sort of a global government where freedom is reduced and people of like mind to the Democratic candidates are running things. I mean, this was always the goal of Saul Alinsky, who was a social agitator in the 60s, 70s, who wrote Rules for Radicals, which our former President Obama was very devoted to, and very much a social activist, in the mold of Saul Alinsky, whose tagline is "Never let a crisis go to waste." So if you don't have a crisis, well, certainly you have to find one, and that's what I believe about global warming. It's climate change. Oops, I made a mistake. You see. Whenever things are really, really cold, you can't call it global warming now. Have a day. So here's a quote from Investors Business Daily, an article in 2016. We've been told for 3 decades that man has to change his ways or fossil fuel emissions will scorch Earth with catastrophic warming. Scientists, politicians, and activists have maintained the narrative that their concern is only about caring for our planet. But that's not true. The narrative is a ruse. They are crafting something entirely different. If they were honest, the climate alarmists would admit they're not working feverishly to hold down global temperatures. They would acknowledge they instead consume the goal of holding down capitalism and establishing a global welfare state. Here's what United Nations climate official Otto Edenhofer says, and this is the United Nations speaking, a representative. Quote, "One is to free himself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy." Gee, I thought it was, right? This has almost nothing to do with the environmental policy anymore, with problems such as deforestation or the ozone, said Edenhofer, who chaired the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Working Group, or mitigation of climate change from 2008 to 2015. So, what is the goal of environmental policy? This is what he says. We redistribute de facto the world's wealth by climate policy. Wow. So we're using climate policy for another goal. And this is what's really coming out. I'm looking for the link with Bernie Sanders CNN report. Did you listen to that, Andrew?
I listened to him a bit at the town hall. If he's done any interviews since then, I haven't caught those.
No. I'm just talking about what he said with the town hall yesterday. It was I believe it was a 7.5-hour town hall. So everybody got a chance, and the questions. Gosh, I don't know why I can't find that. Sorry, Sanders abortion CNN town hall. Yeah, he made a comment about abortion birth control, which was called horrifying by Bing.com News. This is not National Right to Life or Human Defense Initiative. He said his comments were horrifying. Why? Because they reveal the content of his heart, and that's the scary part. And the tagline is, "Are Democrats out of control?" All right, okay. A member of the audience, Martha Redioff, who was identified as a teacher, told Sanders that the planet has experienced a doubling of human population growth in the last 50 years, and this is unsustainable. Quote, "I realize this is a poisonous topic for politicians, but it's critical to face," she said. "Empowering women and educating everyone on the need to curb population growth seems a reasonable campaign to enact. Would you be courageous enough to discuss the topic and make it a key feature of a plan to address the climate catastrophe?" See, catastrophe. We're using these big words. The answer is yes, Bernie answered. "Women in the United States of America, by the way, have a right to control their bodies and make reproductive decisions." He continues, "And the Mexico City Agreement, which denies American aid to those organizations around the world that allow women to have abortions or even get involved in birth control, is totally absurd." He continued, "So I think, especially in poor countries around the world where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have, this is something I very strongly support." So the mention, I think what really shocked people is the mention of the word abortions. Because when he says birth control later on, he's really talking about abortions too, isn't he, Andrew?
Well, I think they see the two as the same.
Yeah,
you know.
That's right. Abortion is the backup for birth control in their eyes, because all of them, every single presidential candidate in the Democratic Party has supported abortion till birth. And if you didn't, they forced you to, like Biden, who once supported the Hyde Amendment, had to backtrack, where he wasn't allowed in the club, even though he was clearly the front runner. It's been the narrative that abortion until birth, and which is in Buttigieg said the other day, until the baby draws breath. Well, that could be any time in the last 3 months, depending on when the baby is born, couldn't it?
Certainly. Well, I mean, I think they're following, it's not too different from what you saw in New York just a couple months ago. And they were saying up to the day of birth. Up to the moment that you're going into labor, you can make that call.
That's right. And also the Governor Northam of Virginia was talking about afterbirth abortion, which is infanticide, that a baby that is disabled, like my daughter Christina, who has Down syndrome, they will be made comfortable while the parents have the death panel decision. He didn't use those terms, but that's what it is. The death panel is
it's terrifying, right? We'll have a discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds so wonderful, a discussion. But what are they talking about? There was a comedian, I believe it was Chris Rock, who called it the abortion tribunal. He talks about when a couple of girlfriends get together with a pregnant girl and they make the decision, and he was, obviously not respectful about it. But and I said, that's really true. These people weighing in the options of whether a baby should live or die. But when a doctor does it, it has this weight, because he's a medical professional. And obviously Dr. Northam had done that in his career as an obstetrician. And so there have been cases, and I know this happens widely, where a child with, say, Down syndrome will not be fed. Will just starve to death, will be put in a room so no one can hear the baby scream as the baby dehydrates to death. This has happened. There have been witnesses to it, and this is what he's advocating without apology, and he is still in office. So, we have abortion post-birth if we don't catch them. I actually interviewed Dr. Peter Singer, ethicist, ironically, at Princeton University, who had advocated that, I believe, up to 2 years if a child is disabled. He had said that a pig has more of a right to life than a child with impaired intellectual ability, like my daughter. And so I defended, I confronted him on it, and he denied ever saying that. I says, well, it's all over the place, Dr. Singer. I think you better go correct the record before it's too late. And, as far as I can see in the past 8 years that I talked to him, he hasn't actually done it because he said that. Oh, by the way, as an aside, I did some research at the Population Research Institute, headed by Stephen Mosher, is a wonderful organization, pro-life organization, and they have a sub-website called Overpopulation is a Myth. I highly recommend that for very short, intelligent cartoons that explain overpopulation. You can look on my Facebook page and you'll see it. But part of the narrative said from the UN that the global total fertility rate population will peak in 17 years. They said 25, but the video was a few years ago. At one, and then in 17 years, every 20 years, the population will go down by 1 billion. Now, if we only have 7, so 7 times 20 is 140 years, there'll be nobody. That's the crisis. That's an underpopulation crisis.
That's the real crisis. And, it was just a week or two ago, the CEO of, Tesla and SpaceX, Elon Musk, is, a pretty big figure these days. He was meeting at, I think it was the World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai, and he was saying, the problem that we have is not population overgrowth, it's population collapse, and that was exactly the fear that
what do you say, artificial intelligence experts? Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And
he kind of seems to dabble in everything. But,
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's true, because if we do not have a young population to support our older population, economically we collapse. It's from the simple model of Social Security. If you don't have enough young people contributing to the system, since they spent our money that we've been paying in, they spend it as fast as they get it. When we retire, if there aren't enough young people, there'll be no such thing as Social Security or Medicare and the things that we've been told we can rely on. That's just a simple example of it. America doesn't have that problem because of immigration, because, younger immigrants have moved in and they tend to have more kids. But in Japan, the population is declining rapidly. In fact, they have a problem that they call the lonelies, where single older people that are living alone die, and they're dead for months before anyone finds them. Well, how does that happen? Well, no one loves them to call them, and all their bills and their Social Security, whatever they have in Japan, are done electronically. So, all their bills are paid. So it isn't until the body is decomposing and the neighbors smell it that anyone knows that this human soul has left the earth. And to have that be considered a major problem shows you what's happening to the Japanese, population. And it's happening in Europe, and it would be happening in the United States if it weren't for immigration. So that's definitely a crisis, and it's the opposite of what people like Bernie are saying. It's really it's frustrating to those of us who know the truth, because we get called deniers and science deniers and all kinds of nice names. Again, Saul Alinsky said that mockery is a powerful tool, and boy, is that used against pro-lifers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's so funny. So on that tweet that I made, somebody had responded saying, the devil just isn't creative. It's the same lie, from 3000 BC as it is, now 5,000 years later. But there's so much truth to that. I know before we went live, you were talking about how, in the 70s, you're hearing some of these same myths about, population, and all the problems population growth causes. But, I mean, even if you look at the past 50 years, the population has continued to increase, but that hasn't been bad for the world. That's actually been good for the world. Mm-hmm. Since absolute poverty has decreased, significantly. In 81, I think it was around 42%. Now it's around 10%.
Wow.
Infant mortality rate has been going down. Life expectancy in 1960 was about 52 years. Now it's 71 years. I mean, hunger rates have gone down. And even in places like Africa, where Bernie is saying this is going to be the biggest disaster, it's an old lie, and every single bit of evidence that we have for the past 50 or 60 years demonstrates that that's clearly not accurate. But here they are, they're still pushing it. And like you said, it's because they're not basing this on science. They're using it as a power grab. So I know some people have called what Bernie said, a gaffe, but that really wasn't. It was, the mask was flipping. It was a showing of the cards, and I mean that's clearly what they want.
Yeah, it's only a gaffe because their side knows it, and they don't want us to know it. They want to show their hand. It's just like when Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, we wanted abortion to lower the population of people that we didn't want too many of. And that harks back to eugenics, which is still alive and well, but it's being done mostly through birth control and abortion. Margaret Sanger was a huge eugenist when it was popular, when it was cool in the 1920s. You had the American Eugenics Society, and she started the Birth Control League in 1918 in Lower Manhattan. Well, who lived in Lower Manhattan? My ancestors, Italians, Irish, Polish, Jewish, refugees from Europe that were there, poor, many children, and considered inferior by the eugenicists who said that people of certain races were more intelligent and more worthwhile, and we had to decrease the population like Ruth Ginsburg don't want too many of. Who's we? Well, we as the people in charge. Okay, so if you're in charge, you get to decide who lives or dies. Okay, that's not America that I love. That's a totalitarian state. That's Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, North Korea, China, modern-day China, when they kill their own populations of people who are not subservient, like the Tibetans, or now the Muslims are in camps in China. The Christian churches are being destroyed. So this is a sort of, like you said, a global power grab. You were referring to the 1970s when I was growing up on Long Island and in a public school, and we all had to read in 5th or 6th grade, it was, The Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich, which really was a bomb. He was a Stanford professor who predicted we'd all be dead by now. Sound familiar? I think Al Gore said we'd all be underwater by now. And guess what? With the Green Revolution and technology advances, we managed not to all starve. So even though it was disproven now, they're making excuses. What they do is they change global warming to what? Climate change. So the narrative changes, and you have to get with the program. But it's basically the same narrative since Malthus, saying that we're all going to starve. And it's not happening. In fact,
If
anything, there won't be enough.
The devil isn't creative. He's a good marketer. So
that's it.
Changes around the message a little bit, but it's the same thing over and over.
Well, it's all about marketing too, because the liberals control people who believe this control the academia, they control the media, they control at least half of Congress, most European governments, and in my opinion, they control my church, the Vatican. The Pope has recently talked about we need to get rid of fossil fuel. It's like, oh no, not him too. So, I'm all for green energy, but it has to be viable. We can't just, suddenly turn around and destroy the progress of 200 years. The Industrial Revolution, I live in an area that used to have a lot of empty, deserted mills in New England. Now these old buildings, thanks to the upturn in the economy, are all turning into office buildings and loft apartments and these really cool gyms and different facilities. Time moves on, but we don't need to take a step backward until we know how this will benefit humanity. Instead of just saying, we have to just get rid of fossil fuel. We haven't found a good replacement for it yet, not really. And I'm not here to talk about fuel, but the point is we need to be thinking of the good of humanity. As Christians, we need to be thinking of what God wants out of us. Yes, he wants us to care for the earth naturally, but we are the crown of creation. We're made in our Lord's image, and we do have the pride of place, as Christ died for us. This is something that the global warming people do not agree with. I remember going to an outdoor fair one time, and somebody had a T-shirt and a picture of animals on the globe. They were here first. I had a picture on my shirt of Our Lady of Guadalupe, who's the mother of Jesus. And I got so many stares that day. I'm like, what? How dare you
How
not
is this
say
the
that?
controversial thing?
I didn't think I was wearing this countercultural T-shirt. And, who happens, by the way, the image on my blog spot is on the podcast is Our Lady of Guadalupe. But anyway, so, how dare you think that we are in charge of creation, that the Lord gave Adam the animals to name and to care for, and not that we are just one of many species in no particular pride or place. That's definitely antithesis of the Christian worldview. That who do we think we are? We don't have. We're speciesist. Have you heard that, Andrew? You're speciesist.
No,
It's a form of racism. You see, if you think the white race is the best, then you're racist. But if you think that the Homo sapiens is somehow superior, you're speciesist. I guess cats. Oh, I have a cat. I know he goes around thinking that he's the best, right? But he's not. I love him, but he's not. But we have from God, from the scriptures, that we are the crown of creation. We are is made in His image. We have the right to think that. But people who are talking about lowering the population through abortion and birth control obviously don't believe that, do they?
Mm-hmm.
You have a very good article on the United Nations declares abortion a human right. A human right. So I want to read from it if you don't mind.
Don't mind.
So what was the date on this? When did you write this? Oh, February of this year. Okay. So it's very recent. The United Nations has decided abortion is a right to life issue. Unfortunately for the preborn, it's not their right. Late last year, the UN Human Rights Committee adopted General Comment Number 36, a document expounding on Article 6 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Article 6 posits that every human being, quote, has inherent right to life, unquote, and that this right, quote, shall be protected by law. At first, the Human Rights Committee's newest document appears to affirm this unambiguous message. Quote, it is a supreme right from which no derogation is permitted. It is most precious for its own sake as a right that inheres in every human being, but also constitutes a fundamental right whose effective protection is the prerequisite for the enjoyment of all other human rights, and whose content can be informed by other human rights. Well, that sounds very good, doesn't it? And then you say, however, when it comes to the matter of preborn life, the document makes it clear that this supreme right is not to be afforded to them. See, you knew there was a catch. Although states parties may adopt measures designed to regulate voluntary terminations, see, we're allowed to regulate them at least. Restrictions on the ability of women or girls to seek abortion must not inter alia jeopardize their lives, subject them to physical or mental pain or suffering. Well, there's a loophole you can drive a truck through. That old mental distress. I've never met a pregnant woman that wasn't in some kind of mental distress. It's not an easy state. It's beautiful, but it has its stress. So, there's a huge loophole there. The document goes on to explain governments, quote, must provide a safe, legal, and effective access to abortion, unquote, in the case that pregnancy would potentially cause the woman, quote, pain or suffering. Again, there's no way out of pregnancy but pain or suffering. And I tell this to the women I work with in a crisis pregnancy, if you have the baby, it hurts. If you have the abortion, it hurts. The only thing is, having a baby doesn't cause you lifetime regret. I've never heard a woman say 20 years after she has a baby, I'm so sorry, I gave birth to this child. Or I hear that every day from women who've had abortions. So this is an excuse. I continue here with the article. In addition, no laws or barriers may be placed and may push women towards, quote, unsafe abortions, including those caused by the, quote, exercise of conscientious objection by individual medical providers, unquote. So here we're taking away religious freedom from health professionals. They may not have conscientious objection because that's going to make abortion unsafe. Well, I've seen ambulances pulling away from abortion clinics, and those doctors are perfectly willing to do abortion, so that's nonsense. I continue. The last point may prove quite problematic for doctors and institutions that find abortion unethical. Will they be allowed to opt out of providing abortions due to moral or religious objections? Or will they be mandated by the state to breach their own ethics? Well, fortunately, Andrew, we saw the Trump administration come down very firmly on the side of religious freedom in medicine. Nurses at University of Vermont Medical Center were being forced to do abortions, and the Trump administration, Department of Health and Human Services, is investigating that. I have 2 daughters who are nurses and, devout Catholics, and they don't participate in obstetrics, so abortion isn't an issue, but there's always issues of conscience when you're a medical professional nowadays, as in the end of life as well. And I will continue with the article. Beyond that, certain terminology used in the document is ambiguous. For instance, what constitutes mental pain? Does raising a child constitute mental pain? Yes. Of course it does. When they say no, does giving a baby up for adoption? Absolutely. And certainly you would be hard-pressed to find a mother who found the process of childbirth entirely devoid of pain. There you go. I said that before. Given that, does this mean abortion is never actually restricted? Probably. Does this mean any woman could claim exemption from abortion laws at any point? Yes, yes, and yes. Even though Doe versus Bolton in 1993 said that states can impose limits on abortion, the truth is that those limits are waived all the time. I saw it happen in Hartford, Connecticut when I was running a pregnancy center next door to an abortion clinic. A woman that had been considering life for several months changed her mind, had a crisis in her life, went to the emergency room and had an abortion after 24 weeks, which was the state legal limit. Now, those doctors came in to the Hartford City Council and lied through their teeth, saying she couldn't get an abortion. But her friend was in our center and said, yes, she got an abortion. So, yes, this can be waived at any time. So even having abortion up to birth in New York law, Rhode Island law, Virginia law, it's really happened all along. Because the loopholes that they're talking about in the UN, they know what they're doing. These have existed all along. All a woman has to do is claim mental pain, and she can get an abortion from the right provider. And abortion providers are not concerned with their health. We can see that by the number of ambulances leaving there with women whose bodies are injured by the abortion. So I'm just going to read the end of your article. And at the end of the day, this all comes down to one question. Does every human life have an inherent right to life or not? If this question can be answered clearly, then everything else should fall into line. The UN needs to come forward with whether or not they still stand by the words articulating the original International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, because at this moment it appears that they do not. No, they don't. The UN is run by the liberal global elites, as you know, that want to see abortion in every country in the world, and they're basing aid on that in the third world. We've seen them push abortion in Latin America. Now, the only good thing is that President Trump, one of his first acts in office was to reenact the Mexico City policy, which says the U.S. is not going to give money to organizations like International Planned Parenthood, United Nations Population Fund to fund those abortions. That doesn't mean those organizations are going out of business. In fact, I think it was Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada who says, we'll fund them because the U.S. won't do it. So there's plenty of billionaires and philanthropists and movie stars who are willing to pay for poor women, women of color, to get abortions. But it's funny because doctors, I heard a report from doctors in Africa saying, we've got all the latest abortion equipment. We've got boxes of condoms. You know what we need? Malaria medicine. Don't have it. Nope, but we've got abortion equipment. What does that say about Africans and Americans and Western opinions on Africans? Oh, yeah, you can ways to kill your children, but save your children from a simple mosquito net, malaria medicine? Nope, don't have that. Or a vaccine. I don't have that either. But no, we can help you kill your children. So,
there's no political points to be scored there. So there's no
absolutely. It doesn't advance the global narrative. So tell me about the Human Defense Initiative, Andrew.
I do. Yep, I write for Human Defense Initiative. It's a nonprofit pro-life publication that started last May, I believe it was. It's a great group. We do a lot of we do a lot of writing. Of course, we publish a lot of articles. We also do a lot of fundraisers for single mothers or people who we find mothers to be who are contemplating abortion and whatnot. So we raise funds for them, or
you do baby registries, right? I saw that for a mother expecting twins. That's awesome.
Right.
It's a great way for people to donate online. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. It's amazing to see the pictures, just, rooms tiled with, diapers and, the brand new crib in the corner and things like that. It's very, very cool.
And are you based out of a specific office somewhere? I mean, they must have an office somewhere, right?
We're actually all online.
Okay.
We're volunteers from across the country. It was started by Devin Sina, who's in Florida. And we've got writers all over the globe. All over the country, really. But but we just do everything entirely online. It's all millennial led.
Isn't that great?
Folks,
that's
it's
fantastic.
a great organization to be part of.
And you have a podcast as well. Who does the podcast? So it's youindefense.com. And your podcast is Scott Neumann, is it Newman?
Mm-hmm.
It's called Inalienable. So that's a podcast you can check out on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. I didn't even hear about Stitcher. So the Human Defense Initiative, millennial-led, nationwide, and maybe coming to you in other languages someday, I hope. It's a great, it's I hadn't heard of until I saw your, actually I do subscribe to, I follow it on Twitter, but I hadn't put it together that this is a new initiative, but I really like the articles, and I just signed up. You can hear me clicking. Just signed up for the newsletter. I noticed you have a great article on eradication of people with Down syndrome, modern-day eugenics. It's one of my favorite topics to discuss, to bring to the attention of people, and I'm very excited that you're making a difference online. Have you had any problems with censorship of social media?
We haven't so much. I know LifeSite News went through, had kind of some hurdles to overcome a few months ago.
They haven't discovered you yet. Just wait. LifeSite's been around longer.
Right, yeah, they're bigger.
They'll get you.
So I don't think we've hit that level of prominence yet. So fingers crossed.
You have a lot of followers. I noticed your article on the UN was shared 32,000.7 times. I mean, that's pretty awesome for a brand new website.
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah. A lot of people aren't happy with the UN, so we can all join forces. Well, yeah,
maybe it came through searches on the UN, and I understand Google is playing with the results. I've noticed that lately. Then I tried to look up something negative on climate change. It was quite difficult. And the search results kept showing me positive things about climate change. No, I want to hear it's a hoax. And it took a while to get it, but I finally got it. So I have a feeling somebody's messing with the score, the search results. And I'm sure I'm on somebody's radar now. How dare I? I'm a denier. I'm a birther and a denier. Oh, my goodness. How offensive can you be? With the name Velasquez, they're not calling me a racist, but don't worry, they're probably thinking it anyway. But
we'll get there.
Sooner or later, they'll find a way to call me racist. But I'm not Hispanic, but I married a Hispanic, so it's kind of hard to call me racist. He's down in El Salvador right now, strengthening families and helping El Salvadorians to be more independent of depending on the United States, which is a great thing. I wish more people were doing that, helping the people in these impoverished countries stand on their own 2 feet and get fair prices for their, in his case, coffee. He's importing coffee. It's fair trade coffee. And I think that's a great initiative. And if you care about the poor, don't abort their babies, help their farms.
Right. Goodness gracious, yes.
He's one of 13 children, and guess what they did when he was growing up? They farmed. Kids are very useful on the farm. He went and got them for 5 years old. He can carry a pail of milk. Kids are very helpful. That's why, for the poor people to tell them not to have children is crazy, especially if they're in rural situations. Children are raised, as my grandmother in Ireland was and my grandfather in Italy, they were raised being part of the family economy. Hopefully that didn't interfere with school. Sometimes, unfortunately, it did. But Grandma was digging praties and, Grandpa was planting grapes. So, and that's part, children didn't always have all day long to watch cartoons. And then they were useful to the family, they were helpful to the family, they were needed, they were important, and they should always be. And especially in war agrarian economies, they're always a gift to the family. But in urban society, the Industrial Revolution had made them somewhat more of a financial liability, at least initially. But let me tell you, as a mother of grown children, that liability ends. And they start, it's wonderful to have children that have graduated college, lots of debt, but to see them making their way in the world and for them taking me out to dinner and taking me on vacation and having lots of fun together. It's a great blessing, and I'm so grateful I have 3 daughters. Like I said to you before, I only wish I had more. But at age 11, I was convinced by my social studies teachers that I should never have children. 11 years old, I was just about to become fertile and look forward to having a family of my own. Born in a devout Catholic family, we believe very much in the gift of life. Pope John Paul VI had just written Humanae Vitae, which said human life is a blessing, that we shouldn't have birth control. And I was being taught to never have children, which basically means sterilize yourself. And because the overpopulation is terrible, it's going to lead to a crisis. And it's terrible that an 11-year-old girl felt guilty about her natural desire to want to be a mother someday. I mean, I did imagine adopting, and that's a beautiful thing, and I've seen it many times. But when you want to have your own children and you're able to, why on earth should you be guilted out of having them? That's just so sad.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a secular pop eschatology. The world is getting worse. The earth is straining due to overpopulation. Climate change. We only have 11 years left before the world ends. All that silliness. In reality, it's just simply not the case.
The seas are rising.
It's part of secular religion. It's part of their eschatology.
Yeah. If the seas are rising, why is Barack Obama buying a house in Martha's Vineyard? That's what I wanted. A waterfront $15 million house. Yeah. I mean, if that's really true, you should buy a waterfront property in Nevada, shouldn't you? Because after all, the global seas are going to rise and California is not going to be there anymore. So, just buy it in Nevada and have faith. Pretty soon it'll be oceanfront. But it's crazy. It just shows they don't believe their own stuff, their own propaganda. No. It's just for the unwashed masses, the foolish Christians like ourselves that believe it and that will shape our lives accordingly. We were discussing how in the 70s ecology, we used to call it ecology, and the environment were very big things, and I was recycling. It sort of went out of fashion for a couple decades. And my kids rediscovered it and said, hey, Mom, you got to do this. I'm like, I've been doing it for 40 years. In fact, in the 70s, we used to get our milk bottles refilled, which is an even better idea. I don't see that happening yet. Although it does happen in my local hippie co-op, my natural foods co-op. You can bring your kombucha bottle in for a refill. But if you're really serious, we would do things like that. And to protect the environment, I'm all for that. Nobody's for ruining our air and our water. That's crazy. I'm grateful to live in a rural part of Connecticut, believe it or not, where, there's cows, although cows are bad now, I forgot, and corn growing, and you can hear birds and see some coyotes running around, and it's beautiful for my children to be raised in that environment. And I see a difference in people who know where their food comes from, who watch it growing, who harvest it, and you're able to buy the food from the people who grow it at the farmers markets. It's a real blessing. So I definitely have a real love of God's creation. But I see it as ours, not the other way around. We are not subject to wildlife, that they are subject to us. And I'm so grateful that we have articulate people, writers out there like yourself, Andrew. Now, you said you're working on a book. Please tell me about it.
Yeah. So fingers crossed that it'll be done by the end of the year. I need to buckle down and finish up a few more chapters. But it's kind of a devotional commentary on First Thessalonians. So not the most exciting thing in the world.
I love Thessalonians.
Yeah, great book. So not kind of doesn't have terribly much to do with what we're talking about, but
no, it has everything to do with we want to live the way God wants us to, but our way of living is contrary to the world. I mean, that's all about it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say is your background for writing about theology? Did you study theology in college?
I did actually, yeah. I majored in biblical literature. Is kind of my history.
Nice.
Yeah.
And what do you do? What do you do to make money? Blogging doesn't bring a living, does it?
It doesn't bring a penny. No, I just work in kind of the normal workforce. I'm a project manager at a tech company, kind of here in the Seattle area. So
okay.
Very, very normal stuff outside of writing.
That's right. Do your fellow techies know that you write biblical books?
A couple of them. Just a couple of them.
A couple of them. Well, it's good to be wise when it would hurt your career, but also to evangelize. I feel for people that are in the working world right now. It's a very hostile place.
Last month was. It was last month or the month before was Pride Month, and so rainbow banners and stuff everywhere up at work, and cupcakes and rainbow donuts and things like that, every day. Like, would you like a rainbow cupcake? No, thanks. I'll pass. But yeah, it's. I mean, the tech industry is enough, and then Seattle all the more so. So it's. Neither right nor conservative nor Christian up here.
Oh no, you're in. I like to call it mission territory. The Northeast, Northwest, the West Coast in particular. It's considered that anybody with a brain and anybody with any acquaintance with science is going to be in lockstep. It's funny. It used to be diversity and tolerance, but that's sort of gone by the wayside. Now you have to adhere to the prevailing point of view, or you are some kind of hater. And so if you believe in traditional marriage,
what they say.
Pardon?
Yeah, it's the exact opposite of what they say. College is supposed to be for.
Yeah. So did you went to a Christian college?
I did actually. Yeah, it was a private Christian university, Northwest University.
Oh, okay.
And, so that was great. Some of the professors were a little more liberal, but most were solid conservative Christian folk. It was good. It was a good place to go to school.
Oh, that's good.
I'm still not convinced it was worth the debt, but it was a good.
I know my daughter's went to a solid Catholic university where the Bible was part of everything, and I believe that is a solid foundation, but they're going to pay for it for a long time. Yeah, that is a shame, and that's a topic for another thing. But at least you weren't torn from your faith, and that's another area which really causes me much pain. I was a public school teacher, and every time anyone caught on to my point of view, I was embarrassed and let go. It was pretty easy for them to figure out that I wasn't in lockstep. And I taught social studies. Well, I taught bilingual education. So I taught basically everything. But, when your faith imbues all your beliefs, it's hard for it to not be seen. And it shouldn't. You shouldn't hold your lamp under a lampstand, right? I'm under a barrel. So I lost a few jobs being pro-life, but they can't say that. They have to make you feel terrible and ridicule you and you're inferior and whatnot. So I know what it is. And then I taught in a community college where once they knew my very first radio interview was about the book I wrote, A Special Mother is Born, 33 Parents Share What It's Like to Have a Child with Special Needs. And it was obviously written from a Catholic point of view. I was having trouble getting assignments every year in my English as second language class until I called them on. I said, look, I'm not a tenured professor, but I've been here 9 years. I do have, the right to get an assignment every semester. I'm probably the only professor in this community college that's published something. So of all people not to be getting a class, this is ridiculous. And then I finally got my assignment, but it was getting a little rough there for a while because obviously everyone disagreed with me. But It's definitely interesting to be in the Northeast or the Northwest and to believe as we do. And it's also hard to be a college student because you want to learn from your professors, you want to break free of your parents and be independent, yet these same college professors are just bent on pulling you into their ideology. I remember taking social problems as part of my psychology major. And this woman ranted on and on about overpopulation for 3 months. I was so tired of it. I obviously absorbed enough to pass the class. I was really tired of it. But I wasn't going to oppose her because I had done that in junior high. I had a teacher that told us how wonderful Mao Zedong was. Well, he was still alive in the 70s. And we didn't have the internet then, but I did a good bit of research to know that she was full of it and that he was killing millions of people in the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward. There's varying numbers, but it's in the tens of millions of his own citizens starved to death because they didn't believe as he does, just as, Xi Jinping is doing today. And re-education camps, people who are have been killed for their organs because they're political dissidents, Catholics, Christians, Muslims, anyone who is not a believer in him, basically, is being killed. So anyway, but there's a price you pay for opposing your teachers and whatnot. And most kids, let's face it, they don't want to do that. They want to be popular, get good grades, and make that big money like we are when they get out. But we lose them.
I mean, school's the meat grinder for anybody of the Christian faith. I mean, you go in there and they will just they wear you down, they attack you. I mean, it is not a friendly place to be Christian these days. My wife does an amazing job.
That's definitely not the case. We had
kids because we just couldn't send them.
Good for you.
Couldn't do it in good conscience.
Well, I did too while they were young, and then when they got into the hard sciences, I sent my eldest to community college, where God bless her heart, she decided to do a paper in English class called "A Theologian's View of Same-Sex Marriage." Well, needless to say, that was a fight from beginning to end. It was a chosen topic by the professor.
Good on her.
But as you know, there's no choice but their choice. She ended up getting a B, which she deserved today. I'm an English teacher, I know. But the professor grudgingly admitted that she defended her point very well. But here's an interesting point. The professor said to her, you must use scholarly sources. So on both sides. So she found some nobody with a master's degree in favor of same-sex marriage from a nothing college I've never heard of. And then she started to look at theologians in favor of traditional marriage. And she's looking at priests with, postdoctoral degrees from European famous universities. And teacher said, no, they're not scholars. She's like, excuse me? How many degrees do you need to be a scholar? I mean, this guy only has a master's degree.
Right, yeah.
Well, we finally found...
Where exactly are we drawing the line here?
Yeah, well, it's, it's so subjective. It's ridiculous. Just a minute, Bella.
Yep.
She ended up using Professor Robert George of Princeton University, student of Oxford, on the Yale Law Review, consulted to presidents for, I don't know, past 20 years or so. And he's a scholar. So I wrote him on Facebook. I said, Dr. George, I'm sure you'll be thrilled that this nobody at a community college thinks you're a scholar. And he laughed. He was very nice. He sent us some articles. But, it's just so ridiculous. I'm like, next time just write something on pollution, Get the A. Yeah. But God bless her. She was able to use that homeschool background and that homeschool backbone that you get. And I wish you well with your three. How old are your children?
My youngest just turned 2 on Wednesday, and then my son turns 6 on Sunday, and then my other daughter is 4.5.
Oh, so mom just kind of starting out there with the reading, writing, arithmetic. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful, it's beautiful teaching your own kids to read. It's so rewarding to watch the world open up to them and cuddling up with books as they read and all that. It was a beautiful phase of my life, and I highly recommend it. My kids have been through every kind of school there is, but homeschooling mostly for, I would say, through grade 5 and in one case and 10 in another. So, and you don't have to be a teacher, by the way, to homeschool. There's even computer programs that you can get that will do it. Wonderful books out there. There's co-ops. There's all kinds of support. But we as parents of faith, of Christian and Catholic faith, need to take the reins of our children's education. It's part of the Bible's says that you train up a child the way he should go, and he will not depart from it. We need to know what our children are reading, what they're learning, and how they're being formed at a very early age. And yeah, at some point they get to test it, test out their wings, as my daughter did, and it will be by their side. But it's really important for that early formation, and I believe for university too. I wasn't going to pay thousands of dollars to university that's going to tell my daughters that their belief in Christ is a myth. I just wouldn't. Not if I don't have to. So I was fortunate, even though there's debt, we were fortunate to be able to send them to that. So it's been a pleasure having you on. I can't believe the time is up already. Andrew Haack, Haack, contributed to Human Defense Initiative. Look up Human Defense Initiative. Is it .com, right? And look up
just .com.
Since Nobody Asked, Theology for Life on blogspot.com. And look for Andrew Haack's book on 1 Thessalonians. What's the name? Do you have the title?
Not really. Yeah.
Okay.
Possibly the Plowman's commentary, maybe. But
Okay. And who's publishing it? Do you have a publisher?
Nope. Probably going to self-publish it.
I self-published 2 books, and it worked just fine. Well, best of luck to you. We'll look for you online, and I will be posting this on Facebook and sending you a link. So thank you so much. God bless your work and your family, and keep up the good work. Keep up those beautiful tweets that make people think.
All right, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Take care.
My pleasure, too. Bye-bye now.
WCATradio.com has a show for every interest: apologetics, theology, moral living, and more. Know Your Faith. Please look up my show, Know Your Faith, by logging into WCATradio.com. Then click on Fridays, and that's where you'll find me. Know Your Faith, a show hosted by me, Robert Madrigal, and we'll see you at the show.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.